Video, I'm going to share some things in this video that could be life-changing for you. It could help provide an idea or provide that missing combination, that missing number to your combination, or that missing puzzle piece to your journey, to your life journey, to helping you get to that place that you want to be. Now, before we dive into these things, what I'm going to share is 5 things that you must know that will help you be successful in your struggle or in your journey moving forward from a substance or behavior that's taken over your life. Now, a couple of years ago, I read a report that said an estimated 30 million American adults struggle with some kind of addiction, or they're in active addiction. And for many people, that was alcohol related, but there's other substances and other behaviors that people were struggling with to the point that it was taking control of their life and creating more negative experiences or more negative energy, more negative outcomes in their life than what they really wanted, but they couldn't get away from it, or they were struggling to get away from it or move away from that substance or that behavior. So if that sounds like you or somebody that you know, then this video, I'm going to share some things in this video that could be life-changing for you. It could help provide an idea or provide that missing combination, that missing number to your combination, or that missing puzzle piece to your journey, to your life journey, to helping you get to that place that you want to be. Now, before we dive into these things, what I'm going to share is 5 things that you must know that will help you be successful in your struggle or in your journey moving forward from a substance or behavior that's taken over your life. Now, to be clear, I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not sharing anything that's intended to diagnose or treat a situation that you have. What I'm sharing in this video is what I've learned through my own experience and through a lot of the research that I did on my own journey, and some of the things that I share with people that I work with as a professional recovery coach. So if this resonates with you, if these 5 things resonate with you, by all means, please implement them, experiment with them, try them on, see if it helps you get to that place that you're trying to get to in your life and in your to be successful recovery journey. So of course, if there's anything that you like in this, please share this video. You know, a lot of people that struggle, if you've struggled, then you know this firsthand. A lot of people that struggle with substances or addictions, whether it's alcohol, whether it's another behavior, we do so silently for so long. There's a lot of times where we don't like the consequences of what it creates in our life, but we're also not ready to reach out, or the fear and the shame and the fear of judgment holds us back from reaching out. So you never know, with 30 million people in America that are struggling with some form of addiction or substance use disorder, you never know who might be in your close circle, who might be a friend, a colleague, somebody that needs to hear something in this video that will help them get to that better place that they want to be in their life. So before I get into sharing these 5 things that you need to know to be successful, it really requires a discussion of the brain. So when I learned some things about the way that our brain operates, it really helped me understand some of the other truths or some of the other tools or resources or things that I'd heard about before. And it also helped me understand why I behaved certain ways and why I was drawn to certain things, or why I would struggle so much at certain times when trying to make those changes in my life. It was that understanding of how the brain operates that I feel really empowered me, gave me that clarity, helped me understand why I would respond or react in certain ways, and helped me feel empowered to make those changes in my life. So I always, especially talking about things like this, I always like to bring it back to something that we can conceptualize that will really help us make those changes. Because for anybody that struggled to make a behavioral change in their life or experience a different outcome, you know that a lot of times there's that intent, there's that desire, but if we don't have the right tools or resources or understanding, then a lot of times we can't make those changes or get those changes to stick so we can get to that place that we want to be in our life. So I want to share real quickly, I'm going to share some slides from, this is a presentation I gave last year, but it really helps understand how the brain operates, and it will make a lot more sense for these 5 things that I'm going to share here in a moment. So a very simplistic model of the brain, a lot of times we talk about the 3 parts of the brain. So one part being, let me see if I can get these slides to work. So the first part being the reptilian brain. So this is the most primitive part of our brain. If you think of the reptilian brain, some of the functions, and again, this is a very simplified version of our anatomy, but if you think of the reptilian brain, one way to think about it is all the automatic functions that we have in our body, the things that our body does that our brain controls that we don't think about. So whether that's respiration, whether it's our heartbeat, some of the biological functions that our body has to do. That's really what that is in charge of controlling. The next part of our brain, the more evolved part of our brain, is sometimes thought of or referred to as the mammal brain. And this is our behavioral responses. So you can think habitual responses, anything that we need to do that will help us with our safety or security of body. So think of tracking down, getting food, getting water, getting shelter, creating defenses, whether that's defenses, in a more primitive sense, like defenses of our body, like defense of our tribe, or in present day, you can think about social connection. A lot of times it's the social connections that we have that help provide that security for us, whether it's emotional security knowing that if something bad happens to us, that we'll have some people in our social connection, our social circle, that can help us out, that can step in and help us out. Also job security. If we rely on our job and our income to provide for those basic needs for ourselves and our family, then that job security is something that's really important to us, to help provide that financial security, to make sure that we can continue to provide the food, the water, the shelter for ourselves and our loved ones. So this is where our mammal brain is really focused, is on ensuring that these things are satiated, or these things are taken care of, these needs are met. But it does it in more of a behavioral way. It's the habitual responses to the things that we need to be wary of or be mindful of in order to have these basic needs met. And as I compare this to the human brain, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. So the most highly evolved part of our brain, and this diagram again is very simplistic. So that's not what the function, or that's not what the parts of our brain look like inside. It's more conceptual. So the highly evolved part of our brain, mostly made up of our prefrontal cortex. Think of that as everything that helps us have that human experience. So our higher cognitive function, our creativity, our ability to plan ahead, to problem solve, to delay gratification, that inhibition, the inhibition control, predicting outcomes, assessing different risks. These are all functions of our human brain, or the highest part of our the human functioning part of our brain. So while it's extremely powerful and can do some wonderful things and very incredible things and helps us, kind of be the best part of our human self, it also requires a lot of energy to operate. So in order to, always with a mind to survival and to burning the least amount of energy that we need in order to survive, when we come back to and think of that mammal part of our brain that is responsible for our survival, it requires less energy. This is our conditioned responses. These are the habitual responses that we engage in to make sure that we ensure the needs that we have for our survival, to make sure that they're met. So the one way to think about this playing out is in that fight or flight state. When we are triggered with something and we feel like one of our needs is going to be threatened, either we're not going to be able to fill our need, maybe our social circle is threatened, maybe our work, our job security is threatened. Whenever we sense that something is threatened and it's going to affect our safety, the way our body responds to that, trying to be as efficient use of that energy as possible, our prefrontal cortex, that human part of our brain, will kick offline and will begin to operate on the habitual responses. So many times when we're in that fight or flight state, we recognize that we don't have the time to sit down and analyze and cognitively process or go through all the different variables or the options. We need to respond immediately in order to protect ourselves, or certainly that's the way that it feels inside. And to do that, to think through that process, or to help enable our survival, our brain will function by turning off the capacity of the highest functioning parts of our brain so that we can get back to that survival instinct, and we act out then on behaviors. So this is really important, I think. For me, this really helped me understand why I would give into, or why I would do some of those addictive behaviors, or why some of those things were coming into my life, and why I would crave them at certain times. So when we have that fight or flight state, when we get that adrenaline, that cortisol flooding through our body and putting us in that high stress state, and the prefrontal cortex kicks offline, our habitual response a lot of times is reaching for or engaging in an activity that will help calm that cortisol, calm that stress, and get us back to a more peaceful place. Well, addictive substances and behaviors, or behaviors that can become addictions, are often a way to scratch the itch, or to help numb or cope or escape from that stressful thought or that stressful situation that we're in. So now we have a situation where we are triggered, our prefrontal cortex kicks offline, we lose our mental capacity to think through some of the consequences, to delay gratification, to assess risks, to think about what's going to happen in the future, and to really analyze in a good way using the full function of our brain. We lose that ability when we're triggered, and now we're relying on whatever our behavioral instincts is, or those conditioned behaviors are, to deal with that uncomfortable situation that's inside of us. And when you have a lot of stress, or you have some effects of trauma in your past, and you are triggered, too often what happens, the pathway into somebody's addiction or struggle with a substance or behavior, and this is again kind of speaking from my own journey, the pathway into that is not only reaching for that substance or that behavior to help solve that problem, but becoming reliant on it, so that we don't, we lose our ability to deal with, to cope, to move through some challenges without that substance. And that's where it really becomes tricky, because we lose the higher functioning parts of our brain, and now we're in a stress state, and we lose our ability to say no to, or to disengage from, or to resist some of those substances or behaviors that we become reliant on. So I really just kind of want to share that, because to me that's what really helped me understand how to make some changes in my life, and really helped me understand and value the different changes that I needed to make in order to be successful in a recovery journey and to overcome the challenges that I was facing. All right, so 5 things. If you want to be successful in long-term recovery, if you want to finally quit drinking, quit using a substance, quit relying on a behavior in order to cope, in order to deal, in order to get through life, and you want to do it permanently, these are the 5 things I highly recommend. Speaking from my own experience, from my work as a recovery coach and running a recovery residence, this is what I think could be most helpful or most valuable to you. So number 1, first thing, be responsive, not reactive. So when an event happens, when we're triggered, our immediate response, our habitual response, that thing that we do before we even think about it, that is a reaction. So before we even think about, process, come up with an idea, analyze the totality of a situation, that gut instinct, that is a reaction. The difference between a reaction and a response is what we do when we think about something, when we're decisive, when we're taking responsibility or taking control of a situation, deciding what outcome we want to create. A response is what we do after an event, or after a trigger, or after a circumstance that we face. A response is what we decide to do after analyzing everything and coming up with a plan, or coming up with a next best action. So the reason this is really important, because those reactions that we take when we are triggered, or when we're faced with some kind of stress in our life, if our prefrontal cortex kicks offline and now it's our mammal brain that's taking over, the more primitive brain taking over that's deciding our actions, well, that's the part of us, that's the part of our brain, that's the part of our thinking that has been conditioned to act and react to those situations in one way, or usually down to one way, which is reaching for a substance or behavior that we're trying to get away from. So to be responsive instead of reactive, a couple of ways that you can do this, or know that you're being responsive and not just reactive. For one, when you make that decision that you finally want to change your life for good, or you finally want to give up something for good and make it permanent, doing it at the moment that you're waking up from the last time that you had a binge, or the last time that you went out on something, or the last time that you used, and when you're waking up and you're facing the consequences of your action, if that's the time that you make that decision, that would not be a response. That's more likely a reaction. If it's kind of a gut response of, oh my gosh, everything's falling apart, or I can't face these consequences anymore, that sounds to me like more of a reaction. And one way to know whether it's a reaction or a response is the emotions that you have, or what's coming up for you as you're thinking through that, or as you're making that decision. So this is not to say that somebody is not going to start a recovery journey after they hit a rock bottom. Absolutely, they can. It's common many times. Somebody will hit an emotional rock bottom or get to a place in their life. It doesn't have to be that way. There's also a lot of people that start a recovery journey that don't get to a rock bottom. And for those that do get to that place, everybody's rock bottom, everybody's worst situation looks a lot different. So it doesn't mean that you have to get to a place that somebody else did before you can start a recovery journey. It's a personal assessment. It's a personal journey. But more often than not, or if we're trying to be responsive, then what is going to help more of the time is looking at the emotions that we're having at the time. So if your emotional state at the time that you're making that decision, that you want to finally remove something from your life for good, if your emotional state is one of desperation or shame or guilt or fear, this is a sign that you're being more reactive, and it's coming from a place where you're trying to survive your situation, you're trying to survive your life, you're trying to get through a part in your life. Now, if your emotions, if you've kind of processed that, if you're coming out of that bad emotional place and you're processing that, and you get to a place where you have a sense of optimism, if you're getting to a place where you have a sense of excitement about what the future could be, then these are signs that you've kind of had a chance to think about it for a little while, and you're in that responsive area. You're choosing to respond to the situation instead of just reacting to it. Another thing that can be a good key indicator whether you're responding or reacting is what you're thinking, like who you're doing it for. Now, if you're doing it for you, if you're deciding that you want to do it for you and you want to do it for all the right things that it will help provide in your life and the place it'll help you get to, then that's a good indication that you're responding to it. If you're doing it because it's for somebody else, if you're tired of somebody, making somebody or being afraid that you've let somebody down, or you're tired of hearing somebody tell you about all the bad things that you've done, you're tired of whatever it is, if you feel pressured into doing it just for somebody else, then that's a sign that you're probably reacting to your behaviors and not at that place where you're responding to it. Another thing that's very powerful, that's been extremely helpful for me, and this is with addictive substances and behaviors, and this is just with habits or compulsive behaviors or habits that I've tried to change or remove from my life. A lot of times throughout life I'll go through and I'll intentionally fast from things, whether it's food, whether it's indulgences like sweets, whether it's things like binge watching TV or social media. A lot of times I'll choose to give something up for a week, for 2 weeks, for 30 days, because I like what that helps do to my discipline, my sense of discipline and sense of control. But one thing I've realized though is pretty much every time that I decide, hey, I'm getting a little carried away with something, whether it's social media, whether it's numbing out to TV too much in the evening, whether it's eating too many sweets. So if I ever decide like, hey, I'm going to cut back a little bit, maybe I'm just not going to eat so much, so many candies or so much candy tomorrow, or have so many sweets tomorrow. Every time I just decide, hey, I'm going to try to cut back a little bit, or hey, I'm going to try to make better decisions tomorrow. Every time I go with that route or come up with that idea, actually I can't think of any time that hasn't failed. That I get to that point, that decision point, and I make a decision that later on I wish I'd have made a better decision or a different decision. And part of this is because those times that we give in the most to those cravings or those temptations are times when our body is stressed. We're either exhausted or we've recently been stressed or triggered by something. That prefrontal cortex is coming offline, and now our mammal brain, the part that operates just on the habitual responses or those conditioned responses, that's the one that's making the decision at that time. So best intentions in the morning, hey, I'm going to cut back on sugar, I'm going to cut back on the sweets. Well, end of the day, I'm exhausted. Maybe I'm frustrated by something that happened to me during the day, and a little stressed out about things going on, and that's when I'm trying to make that decision. So almost without fail, that's certainly a reactive decision, that hey, I'm going to get to that point where the decision is to be made, and I'm going to check in and I'm going to try to make the best decision for myself, almost without fail, really without fail in my life. I always make a decision that later on I wish I'd have gone a different path. Now, what has always helped me and what has a very good success rate in my life is when I decide ahead of time that absolutely without question, for the rest of this week, for the rest of these 2 weeks, I'm not going to touch a social media app. I'm not going to watch TV. I'm not going to eat sweets. I'm not going to drink soda. Whatever that is, if I make the decision ahead of time and it's not a decision I'm trying to make at that point of consumption or that point of activity, it's so much easier to follow through on that, because then when the mammal brain takes over, when I am stressed, I've already made the decision. Now it's not up to me to make that decision in my inhibited state, in my drained state. So that's a great way to be responsive. So number one, be responsive, not reactive. Number two, creating space for something new. Now, whenever we're taking something out of our life, whether it's a substance, whether it's a behavior, an activity, anytime we're taking something out of our life, what we're doing is we're creating a vacuum, we're creating a void. So it's really difficult to, especially when we're talking about addictive substances or behaviors, when you create that void, it's very hard to fight against that and to not give in to that temptation and not give in to doing that thing that you're trying to get away from. So it's extremely important to realize that, or to recognize this point, that when we remove something, we have to bring something else in. So when you're thinking about a substance or a behavior, an activity that you want to remove from your life, you need to think about what you're going to replace that with. It's not enough just to remove something, because then you have this tremendous amount of pressure trying to suck something back into your life for your time, for your energy, for your attention, something to consume your time. One of the most common things that people struggle with, especially early in recovery, is a sense of boredom. Because whatever that substance was that we removed from our life, whatever that behavior was, that oftentimes takes up, not only does it take up a lot of our time, but so much of our thinking throughout the day as we're thinking about our planning, how we're going to indulge, how we're going to engage in that thing. So now when we remove that from our life, it leaves a tremendous void. We don't know what to think about. We don't know what to do. Friday night comes around. We have no idea what to do. Well, we need to understand that ahead of time so that we can invite things into our life. We can plan that out ahead of time. It's not enough just to, it's not just a good idea to use this opportunity to bring in good habits. It's really, it's a need. You have to do this. You have to think ahead of time of what you're going to bring into your life to replace your attention with. This is a great time to bring in a new hobby. This is a great time to start something new, start a new routine, whether it's an exercise routine or a reading routine or anything. This is a critical time in your life to bring that in, because you need to replace that hole that you've created by removing that substance or the behavior. So that's the second thing, is creating space. Realize that you're creating space for something new, and think ahead of time how you're going to fill that. Another thing is, so the third part is focus on what you want and what you gain from this transition in your life, not what you lose. Think about the positive things that you'll gain from it. Imagine what future days, future weeks, future mornings are going to be like in a positive sense. Really, what you focus on is what you bring more of into your life. So when you're focusing on all the things that you're losing, and I remember this, in my own journey, when I thought of giving up drinking or thought of giving up other behaviors, I couldn't imagine doing anything in my life, because I couldn't imagine doing anything without that behavior or without that substance. So it was really hard, and every time I started to imagine the future, that's where my mind would go. I'm like, man, I'm not going to be able to enjoy this. This is going to suck. This is going to be frustrating. I couldn't get my mind wrapped around some of the good things that were going to happen in my life, and too often they just went to what I was going to miss out on or what I was going to feel like was missing from my life. So really important, because where your thoughts go when you think of the things that you're going to be missing, or the things that are being removed from your life, the experiences or the opportunities that you feel like are going to be removed from your life, then that affects you in a negative emotional way, and that can put you back in that triggered state, and that can actually fuel your cravings that we're trying to fight against, that temptation that we're trying to fight against. If instead we can focus on the good things that are coming into our life because of the changes that we're making, these will help fuel more empowering emotions and help us keep in that calmer, stress-free place where the cravings, where the temptations are all manageable, or all become manageable. So third thing, focus on what it is that you're gaining, not what it is that you're losing. Where our mind goes, so where our emotions, and when our emotions go to a bad place, cravings come up, it gets much harder to fight against temptations. If we can bring our emotions to a more positive, more optimistic place, then our emotions will follow suit. Fourth thing, planning ahead. So think through situations, and this kind of plays in with the third thing, but think through some of the situations that you'll find yourself in, and what are you going to do? What, the next time that it comes up in conversation, the behavioral changes that you've made, or the indulgences that you're giving up. For me, it was drinking, thinking about what it was that I was going to say in certain situations, when I was around friends, when I was around family, when I was going to a certain event, what was it I was going to say? Because thinking through that, what was I going to say? What was I going to do? What did I need to have with me? So what was I going to do when everybody else was going to get a beer, or going to do this, whatever it was? What was I going to do so that I didn't feel caught off guard and I didn't feel triggered? What did I need to have with me? Did I need to bring some club soda with me? Did I need to have a cup with water that I can stand there with, so I didn't feel like I was missing out? That tactile response, I didn't feel like I was missing something, because I wasn't fidgeting or needing something to fill my hands. So what was I going to do? What was I going to say? What was I going to have? The more that we can think through these things before they happen, the less chance it will be caught off guard emotionally and triggered by the absence of this thing in our life. And when we can think through it ahead of time and visualize and imagine ourselves in certain stressful situations in the future, this helps create an emotional blueprint or a conditioned response to how we will then react. If we're caught off guard normally we're going to feel triggered, and that's going to create a negative emotional response. If we can imagine these things, the scenarios, how we're going to act, how we're going to respond, what we're going to do, if we can imagine those things ahead of time, then we can create a blueprint so that when that time comes or when that event happens, we know how we're going to respond, and we've conditioned ourselves to respond in a more positive, a more empowering way. So planning ahead, thinking through those situations before they happen, this is critical to making that change last, or making that effective change that you're trying to make. Last thing is focusing our mind, or where we focus our mind expands. So not only does our thoughts and where we focus our mind, not only do those thoughts and emotions and feelings persist, but they often expand. So if we're having negative thoughts, if we're thinking about negative things in our life, we're thinking about stresses, or thinking about challenges, frustrations, worries from the past, shame, guilt, all of these things, if we're thinking about these negative things, not only is that going to help make those thoughts and emotions persist for longer in our life, but oftentimes it expands. So those feelings of guilt, shame, frustration, embarrassment, if we are allowing those emotions or those thoughts to stay in us and stay in our mind, they are going to expand and begin to overshadow or outshadow many other positive things or other things that we'd like to focus on. So some very important things to think about is, don't talk about our failure stories. Of course, it's great to admit that, to get it off our chest, to share it with somebody, and that can be a very cathartic process. But don't feel like you need to be stuck in a position where you have to continue to share your failures, your setbacks, some of the embarrassment, the explanation of your rock bottom. You don't have to continue to share that. The more that you do, if that's the only place that your mind goes. Now, if you're sharing it to create a context for something else, something more positive, something more optimistic, hopeful about the future, then that's one thing, and that can be okay. But if you're sharing it just to share it, and you continue to stay in that negative place, and you continue just to ruminate over the past, that's going to continue to drive down your emotional response, the way that you feel, and your ability to show up as you want to and make those decisions that you want to right now and in the future. If you continue to ruminate over those negative things, that triggers us, and that can kick off that prefrontal cortex, that can bring our mammal brain into control, and that brings back all those conditioned responses, those hard to lose habits that we're trying to get away from. So instead, I highly recommend, and this is something I try to bring into my recovery residents and try to share with all the individuals that I coach with that are in recovery, is focusing on the wins, focusing on the strength that you have, focusing on anything that's positive about who you are and who you're trying to become, because that's going to create the emotions that will allow you to act through that. Last thing is, and this really just kind of expands on the same part, but don't continue to talk about your failures. If you have a return to use, if you have a slip, confess it, but then move back to where you're trying to get to. Look at the days, focus on the days, remember the situations, remember the environments where you were struggling or you felt tempted and you made the decision that you wanted to and you kept on that right path. The more that you focus on the slips or the setbacks or the return to use or some of the failures or some of the times that you didn't operate the way that you want to, if you just focus on that, then it's just conditioning you to emotionally respond to life in that same way moving forward. So instead, ruminate over the good things. Ruminate over the successes that you've had. So often we can, we'll go for months. We'll go for, many days, many weeks, many months on end, and we'll do everything the way that we want to, and we'll make the good decisions, and we'll abstain from the temptations that we're trying to stay away from, and then we'll have a slip up, or we'll do something that we're not proud of, or we'll be, embarrassed by something that we did. The reality is that's one very, that time that we made the wrong decision is such a small fraction of the total energy and thoughts and decisions that we've made over that period of time. Let's focus instead on the good things that we've done, because that's going to empower us to make those good decisions moving forward. All right, so 5 things. 1, be responsive, not reactive. Second thing, create space for something new. You are creating space for something new, and you're trying to take something, a behavior or a substance, alcohol, something out of your life. You're creating a space for something new. So know that and invite something new that you want to bring into your life to fill that void, so that you're not fighting against that vacuum or that void in your life. Third thing is focus on what you want. Focus on what it is that you're gaining, not what you're losing. Don't think about all the things that you're not going to be able to experience or do anymore. Think about the great things that are coming into your life, the greater financial stability, the greater relationships with friends, the greater the physical feeling that you'll have in the morning, on the weekends. Think about all those great things that are coming into your life. Fourth is planning ahead, thinking through the challenging situations that you're going to face in the days and weeks to come, and think about the way that you want to respond, not react, but respond to those potentially triggering situations. Think through that, close your eyes, visualize acting the way that you want to act, and what you're doing is you're creating blueprints, you're conditioning yourself to act and to respond in that way that you want to. Lastly, where we focus our minds expands. So focus on the wins, focus on the successes, focus on the times you did things right, because that's going to give you that emotional response. That's going to give you that full functionality of your full, beautiful brain, where you can make those right decisions and those right responses for the future moving forward. So these 5 things have helped me the most, helped everybody that I've worked with the most, and I know it'll help you the most if you feel that you're at a place that you're struggling and you want to permanently remove something from your life that has been holding you back. Thanks for checking out this video. Oh, hey, thanks for checking out this video. So if you like what you saw, be sure to like this video and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you found this video valuable, chances are you're going to love a lot of the other stuff that you'll find on my channel, and you'll really enjoy some of the things I'm producing now and will be publishing soon. Also, if there's something that was valuable or inspirational to you in this video, please share it with somebody else. A lot of times when people are struggling in life, whether it's with their recovery, whether it's against addiction, or they're just struggling life in general, a lot of times we do that silently. So you never know who is in your surroundings, which friends, which colleagues, which family members might be going through something really difficult that they're just not sharing or expressing to the world. You never know when you'll share something that helps provide that spark of inspiration or hope that they can get to a better place. So thanks for checking out this video. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. I look forward to seeing you back here very soon.